The first step is to identify the product that you want to build your sales message around. In the smart sales system, we use the word product a lot. We'll say, talk about your product here, or what is your product, and whatnot. And when we refer to product, what we're talking about here is what you're ultimately trying to sell the prospect. And that could be a physical product, a widget, a device, a piece of software, a car, but it could also be a service. In fact, a common question we get asked is, does the smart sales system and sales scripter work for if you sell a service? And it definitely does. We just, instead of always saying product or service, we just always say product. But when we say product, we're basically asking, insert your product or service. In fact, the smart sales methodology might actually work better when selling a service, because a service is sometimes something that's it's not tangible. It's something you don't see or feel like you do a product. So sometimes it can be hard to sell a service. And the smart sales system actually fits really well in that particular area. But this could also apply to, a grouping of products or services, or it could also be a feature, or you could also be just trying to sell an event. Like you could be launching a campaign to try to drive attendance to an event, or it's a particular event in your sales cycle that you're trying to sell, like a needs assessment or something. So you might see that and you might immediately know what product you need to build your sales message around, or it might make sense for you to basically have your sales message built around all the different products you sell. But what I would recommend you do is, it can be good to make a list of the different things you sell, just to make sure you're not missing anything. But you could start by brainstorming the products and services that you sell. And just for demonstration purposes here, I'm going to go back to that same example that we left off in on the last week, where I used an example of a salesperson selling gym memberships to a health and fitness club. So if I were that salesperson, I was going through this process, here are some things I might list out in terms of what I sell: gym membership, personal training, vitamins, supplements, nutrition, consulting. The next step is, maybe it might make sense for you to brainstorm some of the different features that are included in the products you sell. So for the gym salesperson, that might be free weights, treadmills, classes. The next step is, you might want to brainstorm different groupings of your products or services. You might try to think of a way to kind of bundle everything together. So it's almost like an everything that you sell, if there's something that you can refer to that, referring to like your portfolio of products or services. So for the gym membership example, that might be is a health and fitness club, but they also have these other packages, and might be worth listing those out. Once you go through that exercise, you can then look at everything you sell, and the next step is just to pick, okay, what does it make sense for me to build your first sales message around? Ultimately, if you're really using the smart sales system correctly, you're ultimately going to have more than one sales message. And definitely for your first message, you should look at your list that you brainstormed and say, okay, it makes sense to build a sales message around this particular product or bundle of products. After you've picked the product that you want to build your sales message around, I want you to stop and try to think about your differentiation. And this is how your product differs from your competition. For example, is your product easier to use, better quality, lasts longer, looks better, is cheaper? I want you to try to think of 2 to 3 ways if possible. Now, for some salespeople, this will be pretty easy. Maybe just real quickly, that your system can be up and running quicker or without consulting services, or your system has a video option and the other systems don't, or your system has more languages. You probably know this right at the top of your mind. Get it down in your notes, and so you can put it into your sales message. Although I will point out, for some salespeople, this will be a difficult step, especially if you sell something that's a very me too type of service. For example, if you're a recruiter, or if you sell insurance, or if you're an accountant, it can be very difficult to think, well, I provide a service that a lot of people need, and I have a lot of very happy customers, but I do the same thing as a lot of people that I compete against. That's very understandable. If that's the case, you may need to think out of the box in terms of not how your actual product or service is different, but is there something different about doing business with you? It could be your price. It could be the way you structure your contracts. It could be your customer service. For example, maybe your product is exactly the same, but when your customers call the support line, they actually talk to a human. That's a big differentiation. In today's day and age, sometimes it's just difficult to get a human on the phone. Well, your product could be exactly the same, but that's definitely differentiation, and it's definitely something you should have in your sales message. Although, if it's the case, your product is a Me Too product, you really don't differ in any sort of way, no problem at all. You can skip this step and still have a great sales message. The last step on creating sort of your product and company details is to think about any company bragging points. I personally don't want you talking too much about the company you work for. I want you focusing more on your prospect. But at the end of the day, if you have some really impressive details about your company, we want to get that in your sales message at certain times. So for example, if you've been in business a long time, 30 years, if you have a ton of customers, if you're a very large company, if you're international and operate in different countries, if you won certain awards, if you have certain accomplishments, patents on file, if you have some sort of financial strength, if you certain ownership details, sometimes it's good to mention that you're a woman-owned business or a veteran-owned business. So these are just some examples of interesting things, maybe impressive things about your company. And if you have any of these, it's not going to make or break you, but it's definitely stuff that you might want to mention at particular times in your sales message and in your script.